Hello, welcome to our latest episode of Breaking the Spell. And on today's show, we're going to discuss a very interesting topic. It's called Dying and Caring. For today's show and episode, we have our lovely guest, Jia Ying. And I'll just read out a very quick introduction about Jia Ying, who's here on our show. So, Jia Ying is an end-of-life doula, mostly for herself at the moment, and she hopes to connect with other individuals to support them and their loved ones in navigating the complexities of life and death. Her exploration into end-of-life work started in 2013 as a producer with Both Sides Now, an arts-based community engagement project on end-of-life issues. She founded Happy Ever After in 2021 to establish her practice as an end-of-life doula to her friends, family, and beyond. Through this work, she's exploring what it means to live life knowing that we will die one day, but not when, and she's learning how to prepare for that inevitable day.
Yeah, so I just want to add a quick note to our viewers. So first thing, thanks a lot, Jia Ying, for coming onto our show. One thing I wanted to add was that, in the previous episode, me and Santosh had a philosophical discussion about death and existentialism with a professor called Kevin Aho. But I'm really happy to have Jia Ying today because instead of having something that's more intellectual or abstract, we really have someone who actually is in the practice of looking after people who are at the end of life and where there's a huge, I can imagine, a very intense degree of care that's required to prepare someone for death. So again, like I said, I appreciate very much to have someone who's a practitioner on the show. And so just to help you guys understand, this conversation would be a little bit different from maybe a much more intellectual or philosophical discussion. So take it away, Santosh.
Yes, so to kickstart our episode, we asked our guests one important question, which is, do you remember the first time in your life where you felt that things aren't the way they should have been?
Okay, so I think I don't really remember the first moment necessarily, but I think that there is one very important moment that happened, I guess, relatively early in my life that I think I want to share here. So I think this happened when I was about 20. I'm 38 now, so 18 years ago. I have a very, very close friend. One day after dinner, we were taking a walk, and he basically told me, I have something that I want to tell you. And then, it just feels like, okay, this is not going to be good news. What is it? And basically, every single bad news just scrolled through my head. And actually, there was one that was one thing that really, really stood out that I remember till today was that I told myself, I hope he doesn't tell me that he's gay. Then more silence happened, and then finally he came out to me. I always look back to this moment because I had a lot of questions for that night. After he told me he was gay, I asked many, many, many more questions about the whys, the hows, the when, the whats. And then as I asked, I think my heart filled with more and more grief, because that was when I started discovering how much pain he was living in, alone. I was the first person that he came out to. And always looking back at the moment, the emotions that came with that night, as well as actually that very weird question that popped into my head, because I don't think I am homophobic, but am I homophobic for thinking that don't tell me you're gay? So anyway, a few years passed, and then I joined Drama Box for the next, I think, 10.5 years. And through the work of Drama Box, I was exploring a lot of issues that were faced by the marginalized communities, other than the LGBTQ community. And I think that kind of shaped my worldview more. But yeah, I always go back to that first moment, because at that moment I really felt quite helpless for not having done anything for the past X number of years that we've known each other, because I don't know. And then also, what else can I do at this point? I want to do more, but do you want me to do more? How much of what I want to do can I do? Should I do? So I think at that point of time, I decided to just take his lead. I really just waited. I was like, okay, now I know. You know I know. And if you need anything, you come to me. Yeah. So actually, that kind of, yeah, that is kind of yeah, I'm just realizing that, yeah, it's kind of a thought that I bring with me in my interactions with friends, and I guess also in my work now. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually like that because I think what you just described could be a very common experience for many Singaporeans who may have had friends, family members who are closeted homosexuals, right? And there may come a day where they may open up themselves, to us, and there can be that reaction as you just described. What I'd like to ask you is, what did your, is to help our viewers as well, right, who may come across that moment themselves one day. What did your friend want from you? What do you think was his, what was he seeking from you in opening up his sexuality to you? And as you said, you had a very, surprising reaction at first, and even you had to question yourself. So can you take us through that process, like what you think he wanted from you, and how did you wrestle with that internal, feeling of contradiction?
I think he knows that I am not homophobic because I do have gay friends, friends. Okay,
Yeah.
can't remember how many were there by then. So, and I think I was quite open about this concept of LGBTQs. So I think what he really wanted at that time was just for someone else to know. Yeah, and that's, I guess it's like a safety net. If there is anything, at least someone knows, and that he can go to someone for whatever thing that he will eventually need. And I think that he was probably also contemplating what it means to live as a gay person in Singapore, and what it means to live a life as a gay person in Singapore, because it had been a painful X number of years till that point, and continues to be painful, because it wasn't until I think another maybe 10 years that he came out to the second person. So I think for me, I just saw myself as someone who would be there for him whenever he needs me. I tried, like whenever I see certain LGBTQ positive news or articles, I would email him. And then I would just see what he responds or not. And if he doesn't respond, I will not press him either, because I think he has his own journey and his own process that he needs to go through. And yeah, I decided that, okay, all you need is my presence and my support, and that's all I can give anyway. I can't hurry or push you to do anything more. So okay, I'll take your lead. I mean, it was painful,
Right.
because you want to do so much more, right? To alleviate the pain of the person. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, the person has his own mechanisms or processes to deal with his or her own pain as well. And as an outsider, as another person, you cannot fully understand, comprehend. And yeah, really you should really just take the lead from the person who is dealing with it.
And do you want to share a little bit about how did you work out with your own internal feelings?
So this moment, it only came back to me, as in it didn't haunt me so much, the don't be gay thought. It only came back to me in 2018 or 19. I think it was 2019. 18? Okay, can't remember. I think it was the first Pink Dot that I attended. So I had not been able to attend, and that year I was able to. And then as I was looking at the crowds of people, I remember this only because I wrote it in a Facebook post, so I can collect it back very quickly. So I remember that day I saw photographers taking photos of LGBTQ people. And then there was this group in particular that I remember that they said, don't take photo lah, right? So I was like, I didn't ask, I mean I was just an observer, but my thought is maybe this person has not fully come out yet and is not comfortable with his picture being published on Facebook. And then the thought came back to me, oh my gosh, I had this thought, am I homophobic? And you know, all these questions.
Right. Yeah.
So I think the way that I see it is that at 20 and very, very underexposed to social justice issues, social issues, very, very influenced by media, upbringing, etc. Being gay in Singapore is not easy and it's painful, and I think I just don't want him to be in that kind of pain. Yeah, I'm wondering to myself whether I would feel better if he told me he had some terminal illness, right? Where we could maybe deal with it, like look for treatment, right? Something more mainstream. But if you're gay, what can I do for you? Right. You know, there is like, and it's so painful, right? From the way that you related your experience as a gay person growing up. Yeah, so I think I hope I have concluded and have resolved it within myself that it is that I was not homophobic, but I was not educated enough about the issue, about the people. I don't know enough, and therefore I have those misconceptions or types of thoughts in my head.
Right. Yeah, I think on that line we can continue now talking about your mainline work, obviously, which is dealing with death. You want to ask?
No, so thank you. That was very precious. Yeah, very vulnerable, and having experienced feelings and pain of being marginalized, the most important need I felt like at those moments were the need to be seen, to be heard, to be held. Yeah. So I thank you so much for even raising awareness of that. I mean, it's so. Yep. It's such a fundamental part of being human. Yeah. So could you just share with our viewers and us what is a deaf doula, and what led you to becoming a deaf doula?
Okay. So deaf doulas. Okay. So first, doulas. I think more people are more familiar with the term doula to be associated with birth. So at birth, a birth doula is someone who supports the mother-to-be before, during, and after childbirth. So this support could be emotional, could be physical, exercises, or educational, what to do, or training on how to take care of a baby. So at the other end of life, there is the end of life doula, or the death doula. I like to call it the end of life doula because death is just one point, whereas the end of life is the end of life. Like, it's a journey, it's a process. But yeah, I guess different people have different preferences. So at the end of the life, you have an end of life doula, who is someone who is experienced in caring at the deathbed, providing support mainly to the person who is passing away, as well as their family and loved ones. So similar to a birth doula, education, emotional, physical, spiritual support, whatever that is needed to help the person transition from this life. Yeah, so that's what a death doula means to me. Why I became one.
How did you come across it? Yeah.
How did I come across it? Okay, I don't know how I came across it.
There must have been at some point that you even like I was saying, this was very new to me, and I'm very curious. How did you even stumble upon this idea that this can be an occupation or profession to begin with?
It was an epiphany. I don't know where it came from. I literally woke up one day And the first thought that came into mind was I wanted to be an end-of-life doula. I have been trying to retrace my steps to arrive at this point, because at that point of time, I think I have heard of the concept. I must have read it somewhere, but I didn't have an article or anything that I could direct that epiphany moment to, or that knowledge of what an end-of-life doula is. So that morning, I remember it was November in 2020. So I had just left my previous job and was wondering what to do lah. So I think that probably helped facilitate that moment. So I woke up and I was like, oh, I want to be a death doula. But at that point of time, what I understood to be a death doula or an end-of-life doula was someone who was going to hold a dying person's hand while the person passes away. So really the idea was that death is scary and I hope that people don't have to do it alone. So I think that was that motivation. So then came a whole morning of Googling death doulas, hospices and things like that. And that's when I found out there was actually this profession called end-of-life doulas. I thought I made it up, right? But obviously not. What I found was about 15, 20 years ago, I think the movement kind of started in the States. Actually, that's where I did my training. Thanks to COVID, everything was brought online. So I managed to complete an end-of-life doula training via Zoom at 3 a.m. because it's at 3 p.m. Eastern time. So it was so coming back to the story, so I was frantically Googling and just understanding what an end-of-life doula is, and I finally decided that I needed to enroll in one of these training sessions just to understand what it is, because obviously my idea of what an end-of-life doula is not accurate, I guess. So the training that I chose was really to satisfy my curiosity. So I kind of just chose a trainer that looked like I could vibe with, one that was nearest and one that didn't cost too much, because I wasn't sure whether this was really something I wanted to do. So that was in November. I sat on it for a while. I signed up for the course in January, and then in February we had a 5-week course. So so the training basically talks about the different aspects of death. So what happens like physically when a person dies? How do you support a person and the family? The philosophies, that an end-of-life doula is, the work of an end-of-life doula is based on, what else is there? And I guess also caring for yourself as an end-of-life doula, because it's a very heavy thing to be encountering very regularly. Talked about also, I think because it's US based, right? So there is also the difference in treatment of different colored people, for example, at death. So there were all these different things, and of course there was a whole part where we explored our own death attitudes. We imagined our deaths, we shared about it, but it's largely reading materials and then 3-hour conversation with everybody. So that was the training. Okay, so I need to go back. Okay, so the point of like Epiphany, I have kind of been asking myself, how did I arrive at this point? And I think that I have had different theories, but recently the most updated theory is that there are 2 things that contributed to it, 2 very major things. I mean, there are other many small things. One is Both Sides Now, the project Both Sides Now, and another is the birth of my daughter, and they happen to start in the same year, in 2013. So Both Sides Now, so basically I was raising a kid while actively championing and conversations in the community about end-of-life issues. So I again, I didn't think of it consciously then, but looking back, I think both informed each other. So from the perspective of child rearing, every moment became very precious, because actually at the start of a baby's life, as a lot of mothers and fathers would agree, it's really just about keeping that little thing alive. Everything is about whether this person is going to be alive the next moment. Has he eaten? Has she pooped? Is she breathing? Is she sleeping well? Is she sick? Is she recovering? So everything that we do, although we're bringing up alive, is actually preventing death. Making sure the little thing doesn't die in our hands. So I think I remember finding myself cherishing every single moment I had with her. The good, of course, and also the bad. There is one incident that is like deeply etched here, which is, I think she was maybe about two years old, I think. I can't remember exactly. I can Facebook and find the history, that post. We were taking a cab from my house to my mom's house, and the cab driver was a very, very horrible driver, and she got car sick lah. But as a baby, she cannot tell me that she is car sick. She just really looked very uncomfortable, and I'm like, okay, maybe this person is car sick. Let's get out of the car before something happens, right? So about 100 meters away from my mom's house, I was like, okay, you just stop here. She's not going to make it, I think. So we opened the door, and then the moment we opened the door, she just puked all over. Yes, she puked on me, she puked on the car, she puked on the door, and I'm like, oh shit. Oh, okay, yeah, oh, yeah. And at that moment, I was like, okay, what do I do? Okay, so I just consult her, and then I was like, okay, let me take out my wallet, and I gave him $50, and I said, I'm very sorry. Here's some water. Can I help you? And he got very frustrated. And then I was like, okay, that's all I can do. I just brought her and I walked the last 100 meters to my mom's house. And I remember at that moment, I remember myself consoling my daughter. It's okay, right? It's just a puke, it's fine. We'll just clean up after this, right? And I was like really covered in puke, and it's milk puke, so it's really very foul smelling. But I also thought to myself, okay, do I have clothes at my mom's house? Because I had to go to work after that. I was like, no, I don't. Okay, so what should I do? So I was really already forward planning, like how do we logistically settle the aftermath of this incident? But as I was walking, I just carried her in my arms, and I'm like, it's okay, you will probably not puke on me again. So I was like, okay, so I tried, and in my heart I was like, okay, let's just, it is what it is. We'll deal with it later lah. So then we just walked to my mom's house. I didn't call her to come and pick me because it was 100 meters away. And then I went in, I was like, hey mom, she puked. And then in a very, very calm composure, and then I was like, can you carry her? Okay, and then we went to settle everything. Yeah, so it wasn't just the happy moments. These difficult or problematic or disgusting moments, also I start to register them in my memory more deliberately. I thought that if I did that at that moment, I would retain that memory more, because every moment passes very quickly, the good and the bad. Everything will pass lah. Everyone will die, everything will die, every moment will die. And how do I then, I guess, bring that memory with me as I continue with life? Yeah, so I think that incident, I think, is something that stayed with me.
Yeah, I think I would make a comment about how, being a parent myself too, like how, all these things you just described, very, very, part and parcel of being a parent. And definitely I can also recall in my own experiences when there are all these very vexing, very frustrating moments, you really, really can, wish ill will, or you really wish like, oh man, why is this happening? Maybe even express regrets, or no, why am I a parent, right? Stuff like that. But they are very fleeting, I think, as you mentioned, and also I think as you grow, more mature and wiser about being a parent, you also realize that hey, you can actually look back at these moments and actually almost laugh at it, because you're like, oh, that was funny, like this whole thing you just described. I mean, I can imagine that moment. For the uncle, for you, it's not nice, right? You're not having a very pleasant moment. But like you said, you look back at the fact that you wrote it down on Facebook, and now it comes almost as a kind of enduring memory, like, oh, this is, very regularly, a very regular part of being a parent, and you almost cherish it because you went through something difficult. Yeah.
I think for me, it just brought me back to my memories of just thinking what my mom had to put up with when I grew up.
Yes.
And the thing is, I cannot remember.
Yes.
But she can remember, certainly, right? Yeah. And then now, if the roles are reversing as she's aging, and there is a moment where I feel like, oh, there's something frustrating that I have to deal with, then I have to always be conscious and just watch myself and observe, like, where is this coming from? Yeah, this is the very person who raised me and to put up with
all the shit.
the shit. And then now this is like how I'm paying her back. Yeah, so that was like my So and you juxtapose the birth and the child rearing of your daughter with both sides now, and so that's how I'm trying to see that from my own perspective, with my mom raising me and then now me taking care of my parents as they age.
Yeah, I should say actually, like even now as we're having an honest conversation about death, but we are also having an honest conversation about being a parent or being the child of a parent, and how, that it's not a rosy journey as well. There are many ups and downs, and sometimes as a parent, you really have to acknowledge that there are moments of sorrow, moments of frustration, and that's all really a part of like living and relating to one another. I think just for the sake of our viewers, maybe you want to expand a little bit more about your arts project, the Both Sides Now, so they can understand what this project is.
Okay, so this project started in 2013. It's actually co-organized by Drama Box, a theatre company, and Arts Walk Collaborative. So between 2013 and today, there have been 1, 2, 3, 4.5 iterations. Yeah. So the first iteration in 2013, we actually took the project to Khoo Teck Puat Hospital. It's commissioned by Lien Foundation and Ang Chim Mo Foundation. So in 2013, Lien Foundation wanted to do a project to further the conversations in public, further end-of-life conversations in public. So eventually they decided to work with us, and we brought the project to the hospital. Originally, the idea was to bring this project out into the community, into a more public space, because actually Drama Box's experience has been bringing theatre pieces out in the public, and we didn't particularly find it to be very controversial, but I think the funders were a bit cautious lah. So we found a partner in Khoo Teck Puat, a very, very good partner in Khoo Teck Puat Hospital. It was a public space, but it was also semi-enclosed. And Khoo Teck Puat Hospital had very nice venues where we could put up different installations, performances, or events. And it was basically a multidisciplinary event. We had visual arts installation, we had talks, we had participatory artworks, we have theatre performances. So this happened in different locations in Khoo Teck Puat Hospital. There was actually a theatre production that was held at the lake next to Khoo Teck Puat Hospital, which is really quite open, but it's not like at Toa Payoh MRT station. Yeah, so it's not a very, very high traffic area, but at least it's open. We really didn't want it to be in an enclosed space because we didn't want the conversation to happen indoors, that it should be outdoors if we want to open the conversation. Yeah, so that was in 2013. And then in 2014, after we have proven ourselves, they was like, oh, go ahead, go to the community. So in 2014, we did over 2 weekends in Khatib an open field, now no longer available open space opposite Khatib MRT station, and an open space outside the National Library at Toa Payoh Library. Yeah. So so it was a 3-day, over 2 weekends, so 3 days each, and we had 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. And again, multidisciplinary. We had theatre performances, puppetry performances, films. We had participatory artworks. The most memorable thing about that, or rather one very memorable thing, I don't think it's the most, is that we had a coffin in the space, and we invited people to lie in it as they listen to some recordings of people talking over you as if you're at your own funeral.
I'm very curious, what's some of the feedback, the reactions people gave you going through this, trying this lying in a coffin experience?
I remember one person coming and on the first day, and then contemplated, took very long, and decided that he didn't want to try it. And then he came back on the last day, and he was like, I'm going to do it. Then he went in . So I guess people who dare to do it, they dare to do it . People who don't dare to do it, they don't dare to do it .
But what do they tell you? Do they tell you like, oh, it's very vivid, it's made them think a lot about their own lives? Or
I didn't really get to talk to anyone in particular about that. I can't remember. Did I lie in it? I think I must have.
What about your experience?
I can't remember.
Oh, you can't remember? It can't be that significant.
Yeah, because I think because it wasn't a very meditative state, right? It was in an open space, and it was more novel and fun than contemplate about your life .
Yeah.
And in a sense, you were lying there, and then you can see people walking around.
Yeah, it doesn't really mimic a real state of death.
Yeah. But I mean, it was part of a bigger installation . But I remember the coffin. I remember it being the talk of the town. Yeah. So that's in 2014, and then in 2016. Actually, in 2014, other than the main arts event, there was actually a puppetry performance that we actually took to senior activity centres. So, because we know that these seniors won't come to us, but they are the ones who really needed that conversation. So it was like a related part that we actually went to tour the piece to 20 different senior centres. And then we did another round of that tour, which is the half, in 2016. I think to another 20 or 30 centres. So, so the puppetry performance, the format of the puppetry performance is that there is a puppetry performance with a very heartwarming and painful, I guess, also scenario. And then after that, we would gather volunteers, one volunteer to about 5 seniors, and we would discuss the fate of the characters. So through the characters, we would talk about end-of-life issues, and they could talk about it safely without having it to be super personal, right? Because it's that auntie's decision, that uncle's choice, right, and not mine. But from there, you start to tease out their own views about end-of-life, their own views of their own end-of-life as well. So I think, yes, arts is a very powerful tool to talk about end-of-life issues. So that was in, is this too long?
No. So you're saying it is 2014, is that right?
14 and 16.
14 and 16, right. Well, actually, I had a question that came up when you were already talking about your training, and now I think it's pertinent to bring this in. So, you received your training through a more US-based institution, let's put it that way, right? And you mentioned how even in their scenario, they look at different, let's say, racial, ethnic groups, different cultural groups, and how they deal with deaths. So I'm very curious also, when you compare, say, the Singapore context, right, are there also this kind of cultural differences as well as to how different groups deal with the theme of death, and just to give you one example, so there's this film, a US-made film, it stars this celebrity, very famous Asian celebrity called Awkwafina. So the show is called The Farewell. I think it's also partially produced in China, because China or Taiwan. I watched the film quite some years back. So in any case, the major theme of the show is that the grandmother character is supposed to, she's given a diagnosis that she's going to die in like 6 months or something like that. And so the whole film revolves around the immediate family members deciding whether they should tell her that she has 6 months to live. And Aquafina plays the US-based Chinese granddaughter who thinks the right thing to do is to inform her that, hey, you are going to die in 6 months, let's make the best of what we can. Whereas every other part of the family nucleus were against the idea, because they obviously had harbored more traditional beliefs, that, hey, we shouldn't tell someone that they're dying, let's just let it be. So yeah, so I'm curious whether you experience this kind of things in your work.
I think I don't have very direct experiences of dealing with death at such close proximity across different racial groups or cultures. But I think what you said, as in that story that you just related, even within a Chinese family, right, there can be already cultural differences. Right. So I feel that the issue of death it's a very universal experience, and yet it is also very individual, right? So within even a family, there could already be cultural differences, even if we're from the same ethnic group, same race, same religion, right? Because of our exposure, our upbringing, our own mindsets. I think, but of course, I think that when we are relating to each other about end-of-life issues, or I guess even just relating to each other full stop, right? We do need to consider cultural language differences. So, okay, we can segue back into the next part of the both sides now journey, because actually that relates to that. Yeah. So the last iteration that I was involved in was a 2017 to 2019 iteration. So it was a 3-year project. So after the 2014 iteration, I think one of the things that we felt was lacking was this idea of sustainability. We come, we pop up, we talk about end of life, and then we go. And then what happens, right? Yeah. Like, where do I go now? Like, who do I talk to? What happens next, right? So we decided that the next iteration had to be a little bit, had to consider sustainability. And we decided to choose 2 different communities, and then we just rooted ourselves in those 2 communities, and we just kept bombarding them with end-of-life issues, basically. We would come back every 6 months with a performance. And then after that, so it started in 2017, we come every 6 months, and then in 2018, we did some sort of a more large-scale visual installation. And then in 2019, we did a festival in the other location. Yeah, so this was, I think one of the things that, okay, so from this, what we learned is that we now have sustainability, but we didn't know that we were sort of alienating, as in it was unintentional. So
can you explain that? Alienating in what sense?
Alienating in the sense of I guess we could create resonance with people who were aligned with us culturally, right? So the artists, the group, we are mostly Chinese. So our sensibilities, Chinese. We're not trying to be Chinese, we're just trying to be us, and we are Chinese, and therefore, right? So the colors that we choose, for example, yellow was our main color, yellow, and we used tentages, right? Canvas, which is similar to the void deck funerals that you see. So these images resonate with us, right? So we use it in our artwork. But it doesn't resonate with, say, the Muslim community, the Indian community. And while doing the work, I think it wasn't so apparent to us. In fact, we were really trying to be inclusive. But I think at the end of the day, as in it was a very good effort, but I don't think we were very successful. So we would make sure that we would try to have, in our signages or in our publicity materials, there will be 4 languages, right? In a very Singaporean way. In our performances, it will be multilingual, English, Chinese, Malay. We didn't have Tamil speaking capability, so we didn't manage to do that. We would put subtitles everywhere, We try to do that, but at the end of the day, because it's very yellow, and then yellow is sometimes also associated with Buddhism, and then like, why do I want to go to an event that is, feels alienating to us? Of course, our friends, theatre friends who are non-Chinese would come because they relate to us and resonate with us through the art, right? So you enter the space for various reasons, and I think one of the reasons, that's also one of the reasons why we did it multidisciplinary, because different people respond to different things differently, right? I may respond to a theatre performance, but you may respond to a piece of visual art, or you may prefer a song, right? And so basically the idea is to create multiple entry points in the two larger festivals. But at the heart of it, because Drama Box and Arts Walk are mainly theatre based, so theatre is one of the features that is always there. Yeah. So that was in 2017 to 19. So this is actually a question that I am asking myself as well, which is that because death, grief, while each individual experience is unique, is also very universal, as I mentioned. And across different cultures, is it really that different? I think maybe if we come down to that personal experience, maybe it's not that different, as in it varies individual to individual. But I guess if we look at it from, okay, this group, what are the general issues that they may face, or the general questions that they may ask, then you may see some sort of a pattern, right? So when we're curating these large-scale events, we are talking to this level, right? But actually, if we trickle down to that individual, which is actually the level that I'm working at right now, I feel that it may not be that different. So, for example, I think one of the things that we shunned away from the earlier years was we tried to be as non-specific as possible, as secular as possible. We didn't bring in religion, but religion is a very big thing, right, in how humans deal with death. But when we went, so in at the end of 2019, it became clear that one of the next direction to take the project, which is the current iteration that I'm not involved in, is to reach out to the Malay Muslim community. So these next 2 years, 2021 and 2022, right? This is 2022, right? Losing track of time. It's Malay Muslim community focused, right? Everything is, the artistic team is Malay Muslim. We did a bunch of research. They did a bunch of research before that to understand what are the key concerns, right? And when you're talking about Malay Muslim community in Singapore, you can't shun away from religion, right? Because that's so intertwined with their lives, right? So there will be these more specific issues that they will have to tackle. Yeah, and again, it's still through a very multidisciplinary approach. I think last year they did. It's during the COVID pandemic, so it was a hybrid event where there was a small live event and then mostly online. And again, it used, because of COVID, I think it was mainly, the ideas were transmitted via film, right? As in videos and theatre for the live audience, but not so much participatory or visual arts. I think this year, it would be more similar to the pre-COVID days, where it's multidisciplinary, many different So yes, sorry for such a long answer for the question, but yes. So yes, I think there is difference, but there are also more similarities than we think, I think.
No, my takeaway is it's a very, the spell of death is such a big nebulous spell, and it's taken us such a long time to shift public consciousness from taboo, which is complete avoidance or close to repulsion, and then we gradated, in a very gradated manner, slowly shifted to, let's say, denial. So it's no longer repulsion, but I deny it. So the stages of grief, you also have the stages of how the public consciousness will shift, and how both sides now has enabled that shift. So from denial, then it's slowly getting to acceptance. Then from acceptance, you talked about inclusion, before inclusion, it was sustainability. Because it was just a one-point impact, one event impact. You wanted to be a bit more sustained over a prolonged period of time. Then inclusion, Yeah, and now it's quite individualized. Yeah, you're doing that just for one community, and that shift in public consciousness is taking place. Yeah, the spell underlying all of that, I guess it's this whole idea of death avoidance or death denial to acceptance, and maybe hopefully one day the frontiers are death celebration and honoring, you know, and like, you know, all the positive things that come with death. Yeah, where we honor and we celebrate someone's death. Yeah, so I can just see that progression in the shift in public consciousness through the years that you described.
Do you share that vision? Like, as in, you think this is where the journey is? It leads to a stage where people celebrate death.
I think so. I mean, we have seen many examples of, I guess, more overseas. Actually, recently I saw news coverage of, I think it was a dance teacher who passed away, I can't remember, and they were cha-chaing during the funeral as a tribute to him. So I think celebrating one's life, it would be the natural place to be. But I think that, as with everything, things are more complex than it is. I don't think we will ever reach a point where we are completely celebratory, because with every death comes a loss. With every death comes a change in somebody's daily habits and daily patterns. And while we are celebrating the life of this person, we can't deny that the person is now gone from our lives. And how do I then sit with the sadness as well as that celebration of who this person is at the same time? I think it's really, how do we find the capacity within ourselves to hold these two things, these two seemingly contradictory things together. Yeah, I think maybe I'm thinking to myself also that I think I used to see the world as like black and white, right? I think most of the time nowadays, I'm trying to remember it's black and white. It's not even grey, it's sometimes black and white. And then how do we hold both black and white together? Yeah.
Like child rearing, the bad and the white, the good, the bad, the ugly, and then death, the good, the bad, and the ugly in every,
So one line of thought I'm having is that maybe the reason why there would be a difference in terms of like whether one's death is celebrated or mourned is because if you have someone who lived a very long life full of achievements, maybe this person, he or she is, has a list of amazing achievements, contributions to society, then, when the person eventually passes away, there's a certain kind of like, this person has done so much good, right? So much, contributed so much to the world. But if we think in terms of like people who have their lives cut short very abruptly, and it's a great shock to not just close family members, sometimes even to the public, in the case of, say, public celebrities, then it doesn't seem like people feel good about celebrating that, because people believe that, hey, this person had a lot more to go on, if this person died, say, at 35 years old, and, there was so much more years this person could have had, right? So I want to ask you, like, in your line of work, because actually, we've talked so much, right, but we haven't even gotten to the nitty-gritty of how you work with someone. So I'm very curious about that. Like, so one question I have, for example, is that, so of course, please protect their privacy, right? But, just bring up some examples, generically speaking, of like, when you work with someone, what kind of profiles are you seeing? Are we talking about people who are much older? Are there also some people who, perhaps, like what I just mentioned, maybe they find that it's too premature for them to pass away, but maybe they have a terminal illness of some sort. So yeah, just give us some sense of like what your work's like.
Okay, so disclaimer, don't have that much experience to share, but I will share from whatever that I have experienced so far. Okay, so in my work, I see myself as some sort of a supporter, some sort of a facilitator, some sort of a coordinator as well, because actually, other than the emotional part of death, which I think we have been talking a lot, there are a lot of administrative, logistical things that you actually need to settle. And because we are all not really experienced in dying, we have all not experienced death, we encounter death much less often in our lives, that we are not used to it. We don't know how to go about settling someone's affairs when he or she dies, right? So there's also that part of the work. So in my head, what I do is a range of things. In my head, because never really do. Okay, so if you want to come to me and you would like to ask for emotional support, I will provide you with that. And then I would also let you talk to you about how there are these logistical things that you should think about. Because, for example, even as, okay, the most common thing that people will think about, writing your will. Why do I need to write a will? What happens if I don't write a will? How do I write a will? So there are all these questions. Yeah, and for example, the lasting power of attorney, right, is a legal document that grants someone else the right to manage your property and your health in times when you can't, right? So why is that important? Because I haven't died yet, right? I'm dying, right? But during that time, I need someone to care for me, right? And therefore I need to decide who to care for me and how the person cares for me, and I need to communicate with that person. So there are these matters that people don't think about when they are experiencing or journeying towards death. So I think my role is also to highlight these are the things that you should prepare for. I mean, of course, there's the funeral. How would you like to be laid to rest? All those things. So I think that is the planning part of things. And then I think spiritually and emotionally, I would support the person, given that I'm open to talk about death. So talk to me lah, right? What are your fears? What are your concerns? What are you worried about? Are there things that we can do now? I'm imagining if you want to declutter your home before you pass, right? Instead of leaving the clutter to your family to clear, you can engage me and we can do some cleaning up, right? Or if you want to leave a legacy, right? You want to go through your life's journey in the same way as a wedding montage, right? From young to getting married. And then from young to death, leaving a legacy. Or if you want to leave certain heirlooms to certain people, write it down, right? Because if not, then you have not left instructions. So it's really preparing, journeying, because I think during this time, this idea of dying is a very heavy thing to hold on your own. I'm going to talk about my first and actually second. Okay, first, okay, second, one case that I worked with. So she is a 24-year-old lady, and at that time she had some sort of a cancer, pretty terminal. When I got to know her, she was about to go into the final treatment. And if this treatment fails, then fail already lah, right? If the treatment succeeds, then she maybe have another 5 or 10 years. But she never got that treatment. And from the time I got to know her, she was basically just in and out of ICU, and then within a month she was gone. Between that, I had one chat conversation on Telegram and one Zoom conversation with her. I couldn't meet her because of COVID, and also because they cannot risk me bringing any infections to her because she's so compromised, right? And she's 24. So what was she worried about day to day? On the death end, she was worried about her mom. What would she do after she dies? She was worried about her friends, because we talked about, if she had 3 to 6 months to live, she would write notes to her friends and letters to her friends, to help them cope. If she had a year, what would she do? If she had 5 years, what would she do? On the living side, she was worried about her marketing paper that was due because she was still going to school, right? And that she cannot finish her homework, in this state, or that she was worried that she was taking up too much of my time, or because she didn't know when she was going for her next MRI, so she couldn't set a schedule with a time with me to meet with me, and she had to keep changing, and she felt bad about it. And I was like, no, it's okay, I'll go with your time because I'm pretty free, so I'm okay, it's all right, and it's your journey that I'm supporting. And so I think from that particular case, and she said that and it's left a very strong impression in my head. This thing that she related, which was that actually that every one of us could die in the next moment. The only difference between her and us is that she has cancer, reminding her that she may die. And of course all the other pain, everything that reminds her. So why should we live differently, really? I don't have an answer, but we do live pretty differently, knowing if we have cancer or not, right? Yeah, so for her, her primary concerns was, how do I care for myself? How do I care for my loved ones? And she actually had one more, which is, how do I care for my community? I think it was, if she had a year, she would want to start a website of sort and collate nuggets of information about how to cope with pain, for example, in serious illness. Like, oh, it's better to lie on your, I think, left side if you're feeling nauseous. You know, tips like these that she had to dig through the internet to find for herself, that she wants to collate something for the community. So I think at the end of the day, I think I guess it's a common human desire to be useful to our community, to our friends, and also to have agency of ourselves, right? So I thought that was pretty powerful, having met her.
Yeah, it's interesting because you giving this example kind of reminded me of like how, so there's this saying, right, like people say something like live each day as if it's your last, and if you supposedly live life that way, you would do things much more authentically, with a much more existential kind of imperative, like if today is my last day, I certainly would do very different things, right? But here I am sitting, having an interview with you, having this really engrossing and very important discussion, and your example kind of showed me that even for such a young person, and tragically, having to pass so sadly like this, I mean, even to her end of life, she was still thinking about her exams. If you think that at this stage, you would think about much more bigger questions, but she's still finding herself struggling with even sort of like everyday problems. But I think it does speak to something fundamental about us, right? Which is we still place a lot of importance in the routine that we have and how they still mean so much to us. So maybe like even for her, I mean, of course, I'm just sort of speculating or posturing here, but maybe to her, like one thing she would really want to do is maybe have a really good grade before she passes or something like that. Right? Maybe that meant a lot to her.
I think for her, if, again, not speaking for her, but my sense is that she was holding on to hope that the treatment will come and she will live another 5 years. And if she lives another 5 years, that degree is very important to her, right? And I think the other thing is that it keeps her sane. To have to keep thinking, to live each day as if it's your last is not going to be it's going to be mentally very challenging.
Yeah, I actually don't even like that saying, honestly, because I don't even think it's really possible. You really can't live like that. You can't live every day thinking it's your last. Yeah, you would be a very different person.
Yeah. So I think for her it was that it kept her sane, to be grounded in the now and the possible future, right? To condemn yourself to death, I guess, and only think about death. I think it's not easy. Yeah. I think with regards to that, living the last day, every day as if it's your last, I have some thoughts on that, because I don't live like that, but I also sort of live like that. So I live knowing I will die, and I live knowing or thinking or assuming that every action that I take today will impact something, and therefore knowing that I may not be here tomorrow, today's action must be positive. Okay, so I also found myself being more present because of this thing lingering in my head. So for example, with respect to my daughter, I would make sure this is something that I will make sure that every time I part with her, is a good parting. I will make sure I will ask her, can I hug you? And if she rejects me, then I will tear her a bit. And then if she still rejects me, then I'll, okay, bye, right? Because she's 9, right? And I think I can't do this when she's 18, okay? But that is one thing. Another thing that I found myself doing was that I started to, like, let's say I'm meeting a friend for lunch, and we said we're going to meet from 1 to 1:30. I will set an alarm for 1:15, and then I'll keep my phone in my bag, and then I will just immerse in that conversation, and whatever else, whatever emergency, I'll deal with it after I'm done here, because I want to give my fullest to you. I guess another thing that, this is very positive, right? And of course I will get angry with my daughter, I will get upset with people, right? But I think as much as I hate it to say sorry or to admit that I'm wrong, I would just do it, because I feel like I don't want to regret not having said it, not having made amends. So I don't think it's the YOLO type of way of living, but that it still informs my everyday living, I think. It's different from before I was so consciously living.
Oh no, that's very precious. So thank you so much for sharing all of that. I think for me, it broke a number of spells within me. There's one particular spell that I'm grappling with, and that's the flip side of wanting to be useful, which is the case that you brought out, right? Like wanting to be useful. The flip side of that is avoiding being a burden.
Yeah.
And there is a spell of being independent and not being interdependent or dependent on others. Like not wanting to receive, but always wanting to be the one giving, right? And I think this is my personal struggle, because when we become frail and old and weak, then that is the ego's last stronghold. I don't want to be a burden to my loved ones who will need to make all of these decisions and will need to clean up after me and all of that, right? I think that's one big spell, and for me, I can even feel it viscerally when someone wants to give me care. How do I receive? And I don't know where does this come from. Is this an important spell that you see, or an important belief system, not to be a burden on others?
I think this not to be a burden on others is very, very strong. I'm suddenly recalling a memory from when we were very young. So it was at my grandfather's funeral. He's Teochew. I think at that time the funerals are still very, very grand. I think it was a 7-day thing. They brought in props. We had to cross bridges. there were huge things that were burnt. It was wow, super drama. I remember my aunt saying to us, and also including her children, next time when I die, don't do all no need to do all this, right? I will do it for my father, but you all don't have to do for me, right? So I think from very young, we are also, I think it's really quite ingrained in all of us that I would give, I will do it for you. But when it comes to me, don't need lah, right? I think it's in a lot of things. It's not just in death or in caregiving, right? So, and actually, when I talk about end of life with issues with friends or I guess my other clients, this idea of a burden, being a burden, is very strong. It comes up quite often. So.
And how do you resolve that with them? What is the kind of advice or thought process you go through with them?
Okay, I'm personally struggling with it too, because I will do everything for you, but you don't have to do anything for me. I think I hold that as well, and therefore, I think these people have come to me to plan, because I want to make sure that I am as little burden as possible. I will be the smallest burden possible to my loved ones when it comes to that time. I remember, I think there was one friend of mine one friend of mine who said that, if you cannot take care of me, just put me in nursing home. It's okay. You don't have to care for me.
I can see he's having a vivid reaction.
Wow.
But I do want to talk about that later. Please continue your story.
Yeah. So, or another person who would say that, oh, you know what? I don't need you to care for me. Hire somebody. Anything that can be resolved by money, use money. Because I don't want you to resent me, right? From the burden of caregiving, right? I mean, it's not easy. Yeah. Or I don't want that love between us to fade, right? Because of the caregiving. I want you to see me in the best light possible. So I think there are a lot of things here that needs to be unpacked. But I think, yeah, it's a struggle because I do believe that we would eventually need to be cared for, because as with at the start of life, we are going to be very, very vulnerable at the end of life. And after we die, someone has to dispose of us, right? And our things. So someone has to do something, as in it is impossible to be completely independent when it comes to your end of life. And this was something that struck me I think it was in a arts conference that I attended in 2017. So the speaker, I can't remember his name, I'm sorry, spoke about the art of care. And he spoke about how none of us can survive and be alive if not for the care of somebody else. It does not have to be your mom or your dad. It could be the nurse or the orphanage director. You know, someone has to have cared for us. You must have received care in order to be even alive, right? And I think that for him, that inspired him to care more for people, and actually also inspired me to make sure that I return this, I passed on this care to the people around me. And I think it has inspired his work, and I think it has also, in a sense, inspired my work and my choice of work.
Yeah, so what I wanted to, the point that you brought up, about how your friend said, hey, like, don't worry about me, just put me in a nursing home. So I think, as you said, this is a very go-to answer for most of us in Singapore, which is, we just think about, like, okay, when I'm old and frail, I don't want to be a burden, and so just put me in a nursing home. But I also think that's a very, unthoughtful solution, right? Because I've been to a nursing home before, and as much as, of course, I respect all the work that's being done there, I value these institutions a lot. They do incredible work, but I do want to improve the quality of care. And I do think, we've been talking very much on a personal level, but on a societal or structural level, there's also things that we can talk about, like how can we do better on this, in terms of like providing better care systems, let's put it that way. Do you have any thoughts about this? Have you seen maybe in other countries that you think we can emulate, something that you think, Singapore can just simply do better as a whole? Yeah.
I think that as with any issue, the solutions is going to be multi-pronged, diverse, right? I feel like in Singapore, recently the push has been for palliative care and for bringing care of the end-of-life patients home, right? So that is one of the solutions, but you will also see that there are also a lot of logistical challenges that we face when we bring a loved one home to take care of them, whether it's in equipment or in confidence in providing care, because we have outsourced this caring to the nurses and the doctors so much that we don't know how to do it anymore, and we're afraid of it. There is also time, and for every person that we have to support caregiving at home, someone needs to work and earn money to fund that, right? Yeah. And therefore they are away and they cannot actually be the ones providing the care. We outsource the care further to hiring domestic workers or freelance nurses, caregivers.
Yeah, let me just quickly interject. Yeah, I have a friend actually who's going through this right now. So he still has his father to look after, and his father is kind of in a vegetative state. So and he's the sole breadwinner. So he actually has to hire 2 domestic helpers to look after his dad. So yeah, this is a very, it's a problem that a lot of Singaporeans will have to face. Yeah.
Yeah, but that is if you have resources, you can do that. But you have people who have no resources, and that is another issue itself. So while I feel encouraged that palliative care is being pushed quite hard, as well as bringing it home. I guess the question is, what does it take to bring caregiving home, really? And are there other solutions other than bringing caregiving home? Because most people are working, as in the younger generation are working, that we can't even spend time taking care of our loved ones properly, or we have to give up a job to have someone take care of our loved ones, aging population, ratio of elderly to all these different problems. So I do think that there should be more solutions that are offered, right? So improving the quality of nursing homes. I think that is something that I would also be happy to see. Providing more options other than nursing homes. I have heard of solutions such as like assisted living. So basically, people live as per normal in an apartment, but the apartment is staffed with nurses and bells that they can ring if they fall or whatever, right? And medical attention. Okay, but for these people are largely pretty independent and mobile, and they can therefore go about their daily lives, right? Their daily lives are not so affected. So on the one, these are also other solutions that can be provided. Yeah. But of course, I think nursing homes sometimes are also necessary for the people who cannot take care of themselves anymore. And if they go out on their own, they will cause harm on themselves. So yes, there needs to be certain rules to keep them in. So I think it's also about how do we then locate all these facilities near our homes in the same way as how we locate schools, childcare centers near our homes, because I don't want to have to travel 1 hour every day to be able to reach my dad who's in a nursing home. Then I would visit him less regularly, or things like that. So I think there are a lot of factors to consider, but I do think that more options is better than just pushing for one thing.
Yeah, Santosh, before you say your next thing, I just want to juxtapose what Jia Ying just elaborated on, right? Because we really have to be a lot more creative and be more concerned. Really, there should be a political will there to try to create this kind of alternatives. Because in an article that I just obtained, and I know this has been going on for quite a while in Singapore, there have been more and more Singaporeans basically having to retire in other places, like in Johor Bahru. So I may include a link in our video description about this article. But essentially, this is quite dismal, right? It's quite sad to see that Singaporeans have to say, well, it's too expensive to try to retire here or to live in a nursing home here, so I have to go to some other country and do it. And that further escalates, the emotional distance they're going to have with their loved ones. So I think as a compassionate society, we do not want to see this being the only solution here.
When we discussed the spell of not wanting to be a burden on others, it brought me back to school. And that's why you say, right, it's like you need to look at systems of systems. And I think it starts with school. Like, I think, let's say in class, if I was falling behind in math, and I've had those moments when I was in university, because I had to do math and I had to do it in another language. So I was a burden to the teacher, and the teacher had a syllabus to cover within a specific period of time, and she had to raise the class up to her standards and to the syllabus standards and not spend too much of time of me. But when she started after class spending time with me to help me level up, all that I was feeling back then was shame. Like I'm actually being a burden on you. And then that brought me back to other moments, like let's say in primary school or where I felt like I was falling behind in my grades or in a particular area, but the only thing that came to my mind was like liability or shame. And so if in school, right, we didn't have so much of emphasis on productivity, or back in the work, and later on in the workplace so academic productivity, and then in the workplace economic productivity, and we did what we could to lift the margins or those who weren't productive, then maybe that shift could take place in helping people to be more willing to receive care and to give care, because the alienation that happens in primary school is then the stronger students don't see it as, let's say, their duty or your responsibility to uplift the weaker ones. That creates emotional distance, which is what we are seeing in the example that it's created an emotional distance of people having to move to Malaysia, right? Yeah, so I feel like, yeah, if we sacrifice standards for inclusion, then maybe the amount of emotional distance between all of us as a society and social alienation would be lower. Yeah. And for me, right, when that happens, it's not at the expense of economic growth. It could actually help enhance things in a different way.
I think what I would do is combine both of what you just said into one main point about how when you talk about creating alternative solutions, right? I mean, a very indirect solution really is also about ensuring that Singaporeans are able to get off work on time and spend time with their loved ones.
Yeah.
If Singaporeans are just compelled to have to work to 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. something like that, as you said, how do you have time to give care, right, to your elderly parents, to go to the nursing home, whatever, right? Like, these are very indirect also priorities that we have to work on as well. Yeah.
I think the one shift for me is like to not see individuals who perceive to be falling behind as liabilities but as assets. So when the strong student assists the weaker one, you get to see the worldview of the weaker one. And actually it's not a liability, there's something the weaker one is seeing through his or her lens that could be an asset. Yeah, it's training to recognize and to be sensitive to those things, to create a shift in the perception and in the consciousness. So likewise, when we transpose that to caring for the elderly, they're not liabilities, they're actually huge reservoirs of wisdom and asset and strength that we can draw upon. Yeah, and that allows us to lose our attachment to doing other things, which is economic production, and taking care of and valuing care work. Care work can be very valuable in of itself. Yeah. So I don't know, like those were some of the broader multiple systems or systems shifts that we need to get to that level.
Maybe to put this as a question to you, do you feel your kind of work is being valued by society, generally speaking?
I think I think that whenever I tell people this is the work that I do, they will find it meaningful.
Right.
Yeah, they'll be like, wow, this is so big of you, But I personally, as in I think this is also a problem, right, growing up in this society, how do I charge for it?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
How do I bill my hours?
Yes.
Right?
I can imagine this is a hard question for you.
Which is why the journey has been very, very slow. Yeah. So so I think there is also a part of me that is maybe subconsciously or unconsciously not valuing my work in the frame of productivity, right? Because caregiving is a very, by the way, it's your responsibility, so you have to do it type of thing. So in the last couple of years, after stopping work, a full-time job, I have really just been trying to get this started, and I have just been spending time caring for myself and caring for my family mainly. So now I would pick up my daughter from school every day instead of sending her on the school bus to my mother, and I also have become spare capacity for my family because I have two younger niece and nephew. Niece goes to childcare, but every time there is an outbreak in school or she has some flu, right, she can't go to school, and my mom can't take care of the two of them at the same time, and therefore I will just be activated, and this happens every 3 weeks. Okay, it's very often, right? Yeah. At that age, and I'm like, if I'm not here, how would they have coped?
I mean, get helper along. That's the Singaporean way.
Yeah, probably they would have resorted to that, or they would. Yeah, I think so, because I know that my mom wouldn't have been able to cope with two very young kids, and I'm not doing very much when I'm there, but it's just an extra pair of eyes, right? But it really just helps, I think. So that has been kind of what I've been doing over the last couple of years, and I think that is what is happening at the end of life as well, right? The work itself is really not that hard. but it takes time, it takes space, it takes presence, right? And we need to trade economic value for that, right? But I mean, a lot of parents will probably agree that spending a full day with your kid is more exhausting than spending a full day at work, right? Even if you have back-to-back meetings. And that is actually the case. Every time I watch my niece and nephew, I'm like, I'm glad I don't have a second one. And I'm really tired, you know? But yeah, but nobody really sees. It's very invisible, you know? In fact, I mean, I see you nodding when I was relating because I'm sure it resonates with you. I mean, I've heard other friends who will activate like siblings, right, to help, because how else, right? Because we had outsourced this care to the child care center, but then now the child care center needs to pass the care back to us, and we don't have the capacity, right? So where are the spare capacities in our society? I think that's also another question. And our instinctual response is hire the domestic worker.
Yeah, and I do think this is something, at least for me personally, it's a tendency that I do not want to encourage in Singapore per se. You know, like I do think that we need to work on much more structural solutions. You know, like I mentioned, things like, you know, making sure that we get to go home on time. There are things I brought up on the show before where I said, like say a law in France prevents employers from contacting their employees after working hours. I think we need something like that, that kind of really a very hard policy kind of response to saying that, hey, you know, we need to preserve and conserve that time for our loved ones. We're running close to time, so I just want to make sure we have to talk about your Deaf Cafe, because this is also going to give our viewers a chance to get to know you, or, you know, now that they may have listened to our episode, they want to get the chance to explore this topic. So can you talk a bit about your Deaf Cafe first? Yeah.
Okay. So the Deaf Cafe is actually a concept or a model that was initiated by, oh no, I cannot remember their names. Okay, go to deafcafe.com. I usually have it written down. John Underwood, Susan okay. Sorry. Yes, deafcafe.com.
Anyway,
okay, so in 2011, yeah, they founded this, what they call a social franchise. So basically, anybody can run a deaf cafe, call it a deaf cafe, and as long as they follow the rules of what they have laid out. So there is a structure, a very, very simple structure, which is basically is an agenda-free discussion. So everybody just comes to the Deaf Cafe, and then the group will decide how the conversation will flow. We start with a round of introductions, why you are here, who you are, where you are from, and then anybody can just start talking. So then this goes on for an hour and a half, and then we end. So when it started, it was a more in-person type of event. So they actually gathered at cafes where there is tea, there is food. So tea and cakes are actually very important parts of this Deaf Cafe movement, because I guess these are like sustenance, right? When we're talking about that. Yeah, so tea and cakes, but COVID came lah. So everything went online. A lot went online, and I think there was a new wave of deaf cafes that started online. So the Deaf Cafe that I run is online because I'm lazy to do it in person. Really, this is real. Yeah, it just takes too much logistics and.
But does it, you know, like diminish the quality of the interaction since?
Okay, so I have not been to a live deaf cafe, so I can't do that comparison. But so far, I started in January this year, and we just did one last weekend. So 8 Deaf Cafe sessions, and every session has been very uplifting, very enriching, and I imagine I can't learn more about death anymore, right? But every week you will learn something new.
Can you give us a sense of like the kind of participants that turn up, like young, old, maybe
the profile of my Deaf Cafe participants have been pretty young, on the younger side lah. So we have as young as 18. We have, I think the oldest was maybe 60 something.
And from all parts of the world,
Yeah, and all parts.
dialing in, not just Singapore.
Yeah, because I also, okay, so I attribute it to where I publicize the Deaf Cafe, right? So I publicize on the deafcafe.com website, which basically people from all over the world would go there to look for deaf cafes to attend. So I would usually have people from the States. I have had someone from Peru, India, Lithuania. Yeah, so far that's been a profile, but mostly Singaporeans. And what was the question? What else? Yeah.
There's a sense of maybe the kind of topics that come up as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So the topics that come up, many.
Maybe describe one that's very poignant.
One that I learned about
one.
was forgiveness. Yeah, like learning to forgive. Yeah, because when death comes, then you need to forgive and forgive others and forgive yourself. So that was quite poignant for me in that one cafe. Yeah, learning to let go. Yeah, and not hold on to resentment, bitterness or grudges. Yeah, so death became an instrument to heal and to forgive.
I'm surprised you have someone to be bitter with.
Yeah.
I think as in the topics are very varied. Like really depends on who comes.
Or have you brought up a topic yourself that you may want to share that was useful for you and for?
Okay, so my own my personal take to the deaf cafes is that I try as hard as possible not to participate so much, because I see myself as a host of the space, and you're here not to listen to me but to talk, right? And I don't think I hold more wisdom than any one of you anyway, right? So I try to hold back. Like I don't really initiate conversations unless there's really dead air and we need to move things along. So the topics range from political ones like policy, why we fear death, why we don't talk about death. Okay, that always comes up a lot. Grief is a lot. And we talk about joy in life. And I think at the end, as in one common thing that I feel over these 8 sessions is that we tend to talk about life more than death. Yeah. So, or rather, we talk about life through the lens of death. So death is present, but life is there too. Yeah. So this just on Saturday we had this Indian participant. She said something that really touched me in places that I didn't know existed. So the conversation started with somebody talking about how she went to a death doula training, and one of the exercises that she was asked to do was to imagine her death. Where would she want to die? And that she had talked about how she wanted to die in Bali. She always thought that she wanted to die in Bali, but after doing that exercise, she realized no, she wants to be in Singapore, for example. So then this Indian participant, her response was that when she heard that sharing, she was like, why can't I have many deaths? And why can't I die in many places? Why do I have to be restricted to one place? And when she said that, and although the idea of having multiple deaths has been in my consciousness, but it somehow didn't touch me in that level when she said it. That actually every moment we are alive, we are dying. An old part of us has died. We are a different person from 1 second ago, right? So why aren't we more conscious about our own deaths? And I guess with every death is a loss, and with every death is also a celebration. And how can we then live our lives with the lens of death, but not fearing it and not avoiding it? Because it is very much a part of life. So yeah, we also go into these very philosophical discussions about what do you believe in? Do you think that there's life after death? Or how do you live not knowing what's going to come? Right? So there are all sorts of conversations that happen, and it really depends on who turns up.
Yeah, I like that point, because I do think when you were talking about how a person brought up the idea about many deaths, right? Like, obviously he means it in a more metaphorical sense. You don't like biologically die many times, but in that sense, as a person with a personality, with a character, you can die many times, in the sense you're always reborn the next day if something happens to me, I may come out a very different person. So yeah, philosophically, I think that idea is very rich because it really gives people a sense of like how much freedoms you can have within your biological life right now, and you can actually like be a very different person, from year to year, day to day, incident to incident. Incidentally, in my last session with that philosophy professor, we did talk about aging, and really aging is also a process where I think, as you just mentioned, it's a kind of death as well. It's a slow decay, basically, to the gravestone. So, Santosh, maybe you want to ask one or two more questions, and I have my last questions for everyone, for all of us to kind of like tackle as a fun one.
No, I just wanted to add, like, I always leave every deaf cafe feeling lighter and like with renewed sense of like joy for life. Yeah, so actually, yeah, you start like feeling quite jaded about life, and then when you leave the deaf cafe, you feel, wow, I feel lighter. I feel, I don't need to carry on to so many burdens, and I feel more childlike. And it's a beautiful feeling. That's what I get. Yeah,
I get that too.
Every deaf cafe. There was like, and then we share resources as well. One particular resource that was quite insightful for me was one of the participants shared that in South Korea there's this place where they go to, and then there's a teacher who he's built this like large gigantic like warehouse of sorts, and then they're what do you call that,
Coffins, is it?
coffins. Yeah, there are coffins all over. Then he'll guide everyone, and then through this whole ritual of like, you can have your own picture. The picture that you have, your obituary. And then people can your eulogy. And then you will then lie in the coffin for a moment and experience all of that. And actually that was an instrument to dealing with mental health issues in South Korea. So it became a great source of relief for students going through difficulties with mental health. So that's how I think like death also became an instrument for healing in another sphere, which is mental health. Very insightful.
Okay. Okay, maybe I can ask this question if you don't really have something to add. So maybe we can talk about, since it's really been such a very personal conversation, how have you thought about your own death? And share whatever you feel comfortable sharing, obviously. But what are your thoughts? And maybe just some questions I would add pepper on top of it is like well, you mentioned you're not religious, so I assume you don't have beliefs about afterlife or after death. Nothing comes after that. But just feel free to tackle this question as you see. So why don't we start with you, Jia Ying, and then after that, Santosh, you can share. I'm curious to hear also what your own thoughts of your own death.
And then you will share?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, mine were the most boring, honestly. But yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so for me, I think that there is, as in, I don't believe that I will exist in this form when I die, after I die. But I think I will exist in some form. Okay, in the way of how in science we have conservation of energy. This bunch of energy will become something, but I don't really know what it is. But I wouldn't know what it is, and that something wouldn't remember what is this, so it doesn't matter. And for me, what matters therefore is how do I then live a good life now, because this is the only thing that I am sure of. I think that my energies, okay, so my body will decay and become part of the earth. Oh no, okay, it may be burnt and contribute to the climate problem. But yes, most likely. But I think my energy in the non-tangible parts would live in the memories of the people that I have touched. Yeah. And then they will carry it and pass it on in whatever form in their own lives. Yeah. So I think that's how I see my death ending for my life.
Very poetic.
It's a difficult question. I've not really like thought deeply about it, but I would probably want to be in like an ashram, maybe in India or somewhere, and then do a silent retreat. Yeah, because I just like being in silence at times. Yeah, and then when I'm closer to my death, then being with my loved ones. Yeah, so for me, I like my quiet time. Yeah, and I also, but quiet time in the presence of a community, like a spiritual community, doing a silent retreat, a meditative retreat. Yeah, but also like then going back and spending time with my family. Yeah, and I think for me, like the two most important people, like because I've done death contemplations and the process of death, right? Like I've gone through that, like in my silent retreats. I think the two people who always come back are like my parents. I don't know why, but I feel like the last few people that get etched into my consciousness before I go sleep into a meditation, it's like my mom or my dad. It's a strange thing. And I think something that exploring deep within is the maybe unexpressed gratitude for what they've done for me. Yeah, so that's what I'm like currently cultivating, and maybe once that has been healed and that is like closed, then something else will surface. Yeah, but something that I'm also embracing is this concept of shoshin, or beginner's mind, which is being with the unknown, learning to be comfortable with the unknown. Yeah, so not to have so many concepts about what will happen, but just to be present. Yeah, so it's a practice.
And what about, like, let's assume presumably that of course your parents will pass away before you. So what would happen? Would you have different line of thought about your own death if they're not around? Like, let's say you are in your 80s or something like that, and what would you wish for someone different to be next to you?
Yeah, possibly. But I feel like the parents, the unconditionality of a parent's love is just so deep and profound that I don't know, even if it could be like a partner or like my own family, I think it's just that it's a strong presence in my life.
Can I ask for both of you,
very selfless,
have you had any recent deaths in your family or anything like that, and whether that experience has transformed you in any way?
Not in my family.
Right. And
not
also,
recently.
Yeah, because I find it quite important. Like I also haven't had that, and I think that is so like crucial to why maybe we are so comfortable talking about it. Maybe also because it's like we haven't experienced that pang of like the pains of like seeing someone close in our family passed away, and I can imagine I would be very transformed by the experience. Because even now, as I think about, well, my parents are still around, I'm very lucky for that. But I can't imagine the day that they would eventually pass away. So anyway, like for me, my mom is a very nonchalant attitude. She's like, I hope I die like my mom, like just fall and just fall dead, like, because apparently her mom, I never met my maternal grandmother, but apparently she passed away very young she passed away when my mom was very young, and just out of the blue, just collapsed and just passed away just like that. And my mom was like, yes, that's the way to go. No pain, no suffering. That's and that's kind of my attitude too. I think going back to the theme of like not wanting to be a burden. If I am frail, disease, a burden to others, I think I would want that for myself too. And that's why in the earlier episode I talk about why I believe at least so much in the idea of euthanasia or self-assisted suicide. I think for me my thoughts are quite simple. I don't really think anything happens after death. I think that's pretty much the end of your existence. But along with everything we talked about, I would like to hope that to the day I die, that I'm contributing to society or to the people around me. I think that's all I ask for. But I kind of recognize that, actually Lee Kuan Yew kind of said it himself. He said that, the historians will write whatever they see, right, after a person passes away. And though we are not public figures, we're not politicians or anything like that, but our loved ones or the people who are close to us will write our history for us after we pass away. And there's really, to me, nothing much you can do about it. People will write whatever they want, and it's okay. You don't have to be around to see what they say. And I think the more important thing is that you really try to live your life as authentically, as personally meaningful as you deem fit. Because you really only have your own life to live, and you got to make it the most personal, meaningful, really your own life. You cannot pretend to be someone else, and I think that's the best way to go. So that's it. Is there any last words you want to close with our session?
I'm just deeply in gratitude and in awe for like the opportunity that we had to have this vulnerable and yet sacred conversation. Thank you so much.
So thank you so much, Jia Ying, for coming here. So maybe just some last words to tell our viewers about where they can find you, and how can they choose to further explore the conversation that we just had.
Okay, So I guess you can find me on, if you Google Happy Ever After in Singapore, then the first thing that comes up is my website. And I have a Facebook page too, but it's kind of dormant. But yes, you can just contact me via that page, and then we can begin conversations from there.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
and thanks everyone for listening and tuning in. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Great. Yeah.